Okay, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jackie Harris. I work in Blackboard Support. It's part of OTC Online. Oh, somebody made shit proper. And Philip Arnold is the Director of E-Learning Systems here at OTC, and he's going to be handling our type chat for whenever I'm sharing my screen. I can't really see the type chat, so feel free to jump in with questions either out loud or in the type chat. Either way will work just fine for us. We'll have someone covering those. Today we're going to talk about Grade Center, and there's quite a bit to cover. We're going to cover some of the basics. We're going to cover a lot of the issues that come up often, and we'll talk about weighted grades sort of towards the end. So, virtual cookies to all of our online participants who are not here to enjoy our real cookies. We're going to start with some fairly simple things and sort of work up to the more complicated weighted grades. First of all, we'll cover printing grades, which is really simple and easy. Everybody has to do it at the end of the semester to send them out to the department chairs or the deans. Or I don't know where they go, but I get asked that question. I get asked that question a lot. So it's really, really simple, and we can show you how to do that. Then the difference between column types, organization of your grade center, so you, the difference of what you see and what your students see and what you might not be seeing. Display options that will give you a little more information than just straight scores, and then the weighted grades. First of all, I can certainly go through the step-by-step sharing the screen, but these are the basic, very simple instructions on how to download your Grade Center. This will pull it out into an Excel file. Once you're in the full Grade Center, if you just hover over on the right-hand side, it has a work off line. Click download. You don't have to set any of the options. By default, they're what they need to be. Click download. Again, after you click submit, you click download again. Then it gives you a prompt that do you want to pull this data into Excel, and you would say yes. Save you have to do a save as to save it as an Excel workbook because it's coming out as a different file type, a Unicode file type, which won't function the way you need it to. So, and we can walk through that in a second if once we start screen sharing, if anybody needs to kind of go over that again. There are two different types of columns in Grade Center. Seated instructors might be more familiar with the columns that they created. Create column, and you put a column in for work that students submit in person, and that's fine. If you have a discussion or a test or a file submission assignment in Blackboard where students are submitting the work through Blackboard and interacting with Blackboard, those columns are grade item columns, and they're automatically created, and they're connected to that item. So you do not need to create another column for it, because then you'll have two. All the students' work will show up in one, and then you'll just have this other one there. The grade item columns will show needs graded. They have that little exclamation point when a student's made a submission, and the created columns will not, because they're just kind of static. The created columns can be deleted at any time from the drop menu at the top of the column headers. You'll have the delete option. You won't have that option on the grade item columns because, of course, they're connected to that content. The created columns, like I said, should not be used for work that students are submitting in Blackboard. It's just for the in-class sort of work. So, okay, so now we're pretty much going to switch to screen sharing for the rest of our session here. So I'm going to share my desktop, and I'm going to go into my sandbox course real quick. Blackboard runs a little slowly when we have a lot of things going on, especially when one of those things is collaborate. So to access your Grade Center, of course you go Grade Center and then full Grade Center in your control panel. And everybody's familiar with the nice little grid system we have here. Excuse me. So you can see on these columns that I have, I can't delete them because They're grade item columns. They're connected to content. This column I just made up, and it is a deletable column because it's not connected to anything, so I can get rid of that. Those are the differences between those two types of columns. Now, a lot of times we get calls from instructors who say students are seeing something in their grade center that I'm not seeing. And that happens a lot of times when instructors hide a column. If you hide the column, it's hiding it from your screen. It's hiding it from this grade center view. But students will still see it. Show hide to users hides it from students. And you can tell that it's hidden because of the little no-no circle. So that means that students cannot see it. Anytime you're working in Blackboard and you see users, that's your students. So if you wanted to hide it and then hide it, you could. But if you're not going to use something, kind of encourage people, if you're not using it, delete it, because then you just don't have that extra in there. If you're not seeing something that students are, you can check the Manage Column Organization. And the column organization screen gives you a more at-a-glance view of your grade center. It'll tell you. Another question? Okay, Phil's going to take that.
Jackie, Susan had a question about copied courses. Can you change the columns in copied courses?
Yeah, the rules will apply to a new course that you're building or a copied course. If it was, the assignments are going to be copied over and the grade columns that they're attached to are going to be copied. If the course that you're copying has created columns, those will copy as well. So everything, it's a copy. So it'll be exactly the same.
So you can go and delete those columns?
Yes, you'll be able to, if they're connected to a content, you can delete the content and then delete the column.
Yeah, like if you just said, well, I don't want to use that, they use it, but I don't want to use it.
Yeah, you can delete that. You can delete the content and then the column will go away. Or if they had a manually created column that was deletable, then yeah, you can delete those. So because it's a fresh copy, it's just like if I Xeroxed a piece of paper, it's yours now. You can do whatever you want. It doesn't affect the original.
When I pull up this column organization, there's a lot of unhighlighted, like, you know, they're
great, yeah.
What does that mean?
Those are hidden, and that's exactly why I was going to show you this screen. If we select like these, and I'll hide them, so they'll look like this. A lot of times you'll have this, and you're like, that's the thing that students are seeing. So the students can see it, but you can't. So then you can just select the boxes, show selected columns, you have to click submit, and then that will make them visible to you. And then if you need to delete them, or if you put your scores in the wrong boxes, you can transfer them over. You'll notice you can also see the category here, which in the grid view is a little more difficult to see. You have to hover over it or open the item. So this gives you an at-a-glance view of a lot of the information, the due dates, the date that you created it, the points possible. It gives you a lot of information really easily, and it's the quickest way to sort of see, this is what's going on in my grade center. So once we have that set, we're going to click submit. And then you might have noticed I have coloring here, and I've got a rule set to make it color red if it's below a certain threshold. And we'll look at that real quick. That's also under Manage button, grading color code. You can set colors for in progress, needs grading, and exempt. I don't really recommend doing that because each of those also has its own icon which goes in the box. The need grading has the exclamation point. The in progress has that little stripy box with a pencil, and then exempt blue makes blue stripes across the whole box. So those are sort of redundant, but you can do that if it helps you. Grading ranges are what you can use to color code different scores. I've set mine to 60%. So if anything is less than 60%, it shows up as red. The text is still black. You can set those to anything you'd like. If you want to know more than, so you want to know where high scoring students are, you can do that. If you want to be able to distinguish your high scoring students and your low scoring students, you can set a high range and a low range, and you can select a color. I don't know how that's going to look in Grade Center. It might look awful. Try to select a less painful on the eyes color. So, and this is not how it will appear to students. The color coding is it's for your reference. It'll only show up in your view. So if we click submit there, we can see, so I have students who are doing well and students who are doing poorly, and then I can kind of at a glance see where I need to say intervene and kind of
Jackie, this is Philip again. I just wanted to mention, I mean, as everyone's probably aware, with the recent Department of Education audit, we all have to be more as mindful as possible. You know, not that we weren't before of student participation in online courses, and this color coding system can really help identify low grades or non-participation. If you have zeros, those can be highlighted, and if you see a lot of red boxes in a row, if you have it set for a 0 score, this can indicate an issue with that student you might want to just kind of track and be aware of. You know, if students don't participate in some way within 14 days, then we have to administratively withdraw them. So just something to help with the LDA process.
Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of times if you have like just a bunch of numbers, it can be easy to sort of not see the zero standing out. But when it's red, 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 if you've got the solid red stripe, you know, there's either a lot of zero, non-participation, or, you know, at the very least an intervention with their scores that needs to take place there. So the color coding has been something that, you know, a lot of instructors are using. Not everybody's using. I guess it depends on personal preference. You can have a wide range of colors you can choose. You can choose like a more muted, doesn't hurt your eyes. But again, it's what you're going to see, and it's a tool that you can use to sort of identify those patterns in there. So let's see. All right. So the basics of grade items in Grade Center, you can go into the edit column information, and that's going to give you a lot of the settings that you would also find on that graded item. You have 2 displays for every Grade Center column. So you can set score and percentage, so points and percentage, or score and letter, and you can use those, you know, however you want. Whatever you select, it can fit 2 in there, and students will see it. Your category is right here, and this is important when you're working with weighted grades. We'll get into that a little bit more in just a minute. Your points possible. If you want to use a rubric, and we had a session earlier about rubrics, so catch the next one of those if you want. The due date entered here. These options should be left as default, because otherwise they are going to change the way your columns calculate. This is the show to students, so if you were in here and you decided you could change it there, hide it, and then have that red no circle. So you can do it there also. Once you have everything set, submit. And that's all of the information really that Grade Center is going to give you. I'm going to go ahead and move into weighted grades. We have a lot of questions about weighted grades come up every semester. Oh, I'm sorry, quickly, before I mention weighted grades, let me talk about this little green check mark, which everybody sees on their total column. First, if you're using straight points, delete your weighted total column, because it's just going to confuse students. It doesn't need to be there. If you're using a weighted total, definitely delete your total column, because that will really confuse students, because the total is calculating flat total. And so it will give a very different score to students than the weighted total will. So you want to make sure that it's deleted. Usually when you're in Grade Center, you'll see the green check mark on the total column, because by default, it's on the total column. You can set that green check mark to any column you like. It's best really to have it on one of the total or weighted total. It's the external total, and it's the one that reports out when students log in and they're on their My Institution. They have one of their little boxes that's over here is their report card, and it has grades. And it's the score that will show up there. So if you have it set to score, so it's points, it'll just show points. If you have it percentage, letter, so on and so forth. It's the reporting out grade. Let me go back in there. So it's the score that's going to report out to students. So if you were using, if you had it set on total, but you're actually basing their grade on the weighted total, then they're going to see that total, and it might be very, very different from their actual grade that will go on their transcript. So you want to make sure that if you're using weighted total, you have weighted. If you're using total, you use total. You should never have both, really.
Jackie, how do you set that external view? How do you put the check mark on one?
That's what I was just about to say. The way you change which column is displaying is from the column header menu set as external grade. Yeah, it's called the external grade because it's sending it out somewhere else. So if we set that as external, then our check mark moves over. And that's how we know which one is reporting out. You can't delete the column that is the external grade. So if you were using weighted grades, you would set it as the external column, and then you could delete the total columns. So, and you never have to worry if you accidentally delete the wrong total column, because it is calculated, you can add it back in. So you're not actually deleting the student's work. Now the other columns, that's a different story. So to set up weighted grades, there are 3 really important things you have to make sure you have right. You have to have your weighted column set up so that it's counting all of the categories. You have to have all of your categories weighted properly, and you have to have all of your assignments in the right category. But we're going to start with the categories. Under the Manage categories, by default, Blackboard has a few categories. They have tests, surveys, journals, some of the things that are built in. You can create a category, and you can create all your own categories, or you can use the built-in categories if you wanted to use assignments as assignments, discussions as discussions, tests as tests. But then you wanted a separate category for your final exam. You can create any category you want. Just have to give it a name. Midterm. You can add a description, but you don't have to. Click Submit. At this point, you just have the category. It's not being applied to any of the work, and it's not being calculated in the total. So if we go, once we have all of our categories set, click OK to go back to the Grade Center. You'll want to set up your weighted total column. And we do that under the column header menu, Edit Column Information. Again, you have the 2 different displays, and you can set them to whatever you like.
What was that? Edit, I'm sorry.
Edit Column Information. Mm-hmm. And that's how you edit any of the columns. And for a weighted column, it's a little different than the others because it has to calculate the weight. On this side, you'll see your categories that you have, and on this box, you'll see the categories that are being calculated and the percentages that they're being calculated at. So if we wanted to say we need to also add a midterm, we would select it and click the arrow, and it would be added to our boxes at the bottom. Have to add up to 100% because we'll just doesn't make sense otherwise. So if I'm going to add a new category, I have to borrow some points from somewhere. Well, let's say discussions are going to be worth 15, and our midterm will be worth 5. And it will tell you when your weights are added up to 100, it won't let you do anything differently. So you want to make sure that all of the categories that you intended to use, that you had listed in your syllabus, that are applied to your assignments are in this box, and that they're all the correct weight. Okay, once you have that, you have the running total, which is default, which should be true for all of your, whether you're doing weighted or regular total. Running total means that if the work hasn't been done yet, the later in the coursework, it won't count against them as a 0. Right, right. Which is also why at the end of the semester, when you have, if you're accepting late work, that you go back at the point when you don't accept any more work and you put in 0s. Otherwise, it won't count against them, and it'll be like it was never assigned.
So if you have students that drop, then you go.
If the students have dropped, you don't have to put the 0s in at the end of the semester because they're dropped. But the students who stayed in but didn't turn in assignments, you want to make sure that you put 0s in for those. Because otherwise it doesn't count on their grade at all. And then it's like, it's the same as if you would have put 100% there.
The students that drop, their name still comes out the time.
Yeah.
But it has that little.
The circle on it. Yeah.
So that means there's no.
Yeah, you can just ignore those. Yeah. Okay, and then once you have all your categories, click Submit. Okay, so that's the second step, is to set up the weights and the categories. Now, the third step is probably the most important, and that's making sure that all of your assignments, so all of your columns, have a category, and that they're in the right category. Now, the good news is there are 3 ways you can do this. The really good news is one of those ways is really fascinating. The bad news is if you miss one and you have a lot of grade items, it's going to be hard to find. So the good news is on every assignment, when you create test an assignment, it has that box under there where you set the category. The second way is from the edit column information on the individual column. And like we saw before, under the display is the category. And all of the categories that are in your course, whether you're using them or not, are going to show up in this box. So if you do make your own categories, please do not name them exactly the same as the existing categories, because then you're using, one is calculating and one isn't, and I've had that happen, and it's a painful experience for everyone. So be very judicious with your naming conventions. So we can set it there. Now the best way, the most fantastic thing about Grade Center, which I would never have expected out of Blackboard because it's not usually super convenient, under Manage Column Organization, we have this fantastic screen that tells us these are all in categories. So I can go through and say, that wasn't supposed to be a test, or that's the final, it's supposed to be in the final column. You can select them as many as you need to right here and change their category. Yay! So you can do multiple. So honestly, if you forgot every single one of your categories, when you set up all your assignments and you built your course and it's beautiful, you don't have to go through every lesson. You don't have to go through every column in Grade Center. You can come to the Manage Column Organization screen and you can select them and change their categories automatically. But again, you want to make sure you're using the categories that are in that box on the right-hand side. And then Submit, and it's fantastic. A lot of things in Blackboard you can't do in bulk, so I'm super, super excited that you can do that in bulk, especially when it comes to grades, because it's kind of a huge deal. So those are the 3 biggest things about weighted grades. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention is that if you call us or a student calls us and they say, my grade's not calculating properly, my grade's not calculating properly, I have never seen Blackboard honestly not calculate properly. I have seen some slight discrepancies when it comes to weighted grades, and usually we've been able to track that down, and it's rarely a large percentage. And sometimes it's been when it's extra credit, which can get a little janky. So weighted grades are more complex, but if you want to use weighted grades, totally at the discretion of the instructor. It's a little harder for us to check, but whether you're using weighted grades or straight total, the first thing we're going to do is look at that Manage Column Organization. And that's why I advise all of you to look there first, because it gives you an overview, it gives you all the information. If you know that something's miscalculating and you can't find it there, work offline download, which is what I was mentioned at the beginning, is how we download grades, submit into Excel, and that's where we would go to calculate through Excel and manage and figure out like where is it breaking? You know, what scores are not coming in. We'll put in a fake student with all perfect scores, a fake student with all no scores, and just try to compare and contrast and figure out where is the breakage. So if you have an issue with calculations in Grade Center that you can't find through column organization, you might try downloading it and putting it into Excel. And if you can't find it, give us a call. We've done it all a million times. So.
Can I ask you something about extra credit column?
Yes.
Now, I've got one in my class that means basically I just give it a total of 0.
Yes.
That's correct, you know?
Yes. If you have an extra credit, if you want to give an extra credit assignment, you would set it worth 0 points, and then anything you put in there is going to go over that. If you're using weighted grades, you have to determine what you still have to put in the category, or it's not counting at all. So it gets complicated when it's weighted grades and extra credit. So, and there's some argument whether it calculates extra credit properly in weighted grades. And if you do a whole lot of research across a lot of institutions and through Blackboard, they can explain the very complicated math of weighted extra credit. And what it comes down to is there's 2 different schools of thought on how that should be calculated. And it honestly never makes a huge impact on students' grades. It's going to push them just that little bit, which is what extra credit is intended to do. So it's not going to be a make or break kind of situation. So. And that's weighted grades. Really, we've had a lot of problems with weighted grades, but we've managed to sort of break it down into those 3 items. Make sure your weights are set up properly, make sure your categories are set up properly, and make sure all your items are in the right categories. So, do we have any questions? All right. Well, let me see. I can get our screen to stop sharing. Philip, you may have to stop the screen share for us because it's not, the box is not showing up on ours.
Okay, you want to go back to the slides then?
To the right. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Okay, so we covered the column organization. We covered the show hide, which I included in the slides in case anybody wants the slides because we did this a lot. Just remember, show hiding users are your students, and hiding it is hiding it from you. And the display options, you can use those to color code, find your spots that you need to intervene your students, and then the 3 steps to weighted grades. So these are our weighted grade tips. So that column organization screen is your very best friend of ever. It gives you a really great overview, categories, your weights. Oh, here is a point that I forgot to mention was the point values in a category. If you have a discussions category, you want to make sure that you have basically all of those worth the same amount of points. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to pinpoint where the calculations are getting thrown off or what's really changing. So if you have tests and quizzes and assignments and discussions, you want to make sure they're pretty close in range. Like all your discussions should be within 5 points of each other. All your tests within 10. Just so there's not like a discussion worth 5 points and a discussion worth 75 points and a discussion worth 32 points. If it's all over the place, I don't know what kind of math experts we'll have to pull in to check it if anything goes wrong, because it's going to be really hard to sort of move those out. And then weighting the columns evenly, and that's by default in there. So if you ever notice it says weight columns evenly or proportionally, make it evenly, because again, it'll get really difficult to calculate on.
Jackie, I don't think you touched on organizing your items in your grade center, which is under the managed columns area. I think a lot of instructors, they assume when they create an assignment it's going to be in chronological order, which is not the case. So we might want to show that.
It says hosting is paused. Are you guys seeing my desktop?
Yeah, it's kind of broken up right now.
Okay.
Let me see if I can refresh. There it went.
There we go. Okay. Now do we have it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, under Manage Column Organization, we'll also give you the order that the columns are appearing in your Grade Center. So it goes down, whereas in Grade Center it goes to the right. So if you wanted to rearrange these columns, and just grab them and drag them up or down and put them wherever you would like, because they don't automatically appear in chronological order. So you can scooch them around, and then once you've got them, make sure you always click Submit, because if you just navigate away, it's not going to save it. And then your columns will appear in the order that you move them to. You do have the option here to select the order that the columns are going to go in, but it doesn't stick. It resets like every time you come in. And the layout position, that's that position in the column organization. If you change that to categories, it will group them by categories: due date, date created, points possible, and display name would be alphabetical. So, but layout position is default, and it's really the best. It's really the best option, because then you can go into the column organization and see it all on one screen, so that's not like spread out. So, and you can organize it here, and then your organization here will reflect your column order here. So that's why I want to leave that at layout position. But that's a very good point, because a lot of times you get a lot of columns and it's very hard to sort of scroll back and forth and find what you're looking for. So
if you don't have them, I'm sorry, if you don't have them in a logical order, whatever your students are going to, how they're seeing it in their grade center, they'll be out of order as well.
Yeah.
So it can be confusing to students if you don't have them in some sort of sequence or chronological order by due date, etc.
Yeah, and it's good if you name your items. I mean, they'll be, by default, they'll name what the item is named. But if you have a numbering system, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3 for all the lesson or unit 1 items, and that's best practices that OTC Online recommends, and it really makes a big, big difference. It's easier to find things. It's easier to navigate for students, for instructors. It's not easier for us to navigate in your course. If we need to investigate something, we can find it quickly, like S34, well, it's in lesson 3, and it's going to be here, and it's easier when you're organizing the columns, because there'll be numbers and not just like a title. And then you have to think, okay, when did we study, major bones, or when did we study, spreadsheets, or whatever your courses might entail. So it's good to have those enumerated naming conventions also. I do want to go over the student view tool, because that way you can see what students see when they see grades, because they obviously do not see your entire grade center and all the other student grades. So under your course tools, student view, if you don't see it here, go down to customization, tool availability, and you'll see all the tools that we have in Blackboard. They're in alphabetical order, so if you scroll down to the S's, check the box for student view application, click submit. Then it will appear under your course tools, student view, and you'll be able to see the course exactly as students see it. It logs you out completely and logs in a demo user. The only difference is the teacher view button, which allows you to go back to your own login, and students don't have that. But we'll have a look at what grades look like for students. They see a screen that looks like this. It's a vertical list, not the horizontal rows. It's not a grid system at all. It's going to be in the same order that your columns are, with submitted items that haven't been graded will go to this section at the bottom. Upcoming items that haven't yet been submitted will be down here, but anything that's been submitted will be up here in the order of the grade columns.
So if I had hidden columns like I know I do, and where will they appear for the students? Will they appear right there?
Yes, they will.
In upcoming?
Well, because it's not an assignment that they've done, or if you've hidden a column for yourself that they have submitted on, it would be here, or if it's automatically graded, it would be here. So
if it's just hidden, I'm not going to do it, and for some reason I just hid it, thinking I hid it from them too, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So where would it?
It would show up here if you write a column for a student.
So they'll think it's upcoming.
Yes.
They'll think that's what we're doing.
Yes.
Support to the leaders so they don't think.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why it's important to hide the students from the user, or the columns from the users, or delete the columns, because they will show up here and students will see those columns and think, when are we going to get that? I haven't seen that, and especially if there's a due date listed on it, and then they'll really, really panic. Because they're like, this is due, but we never saw it, we never got it. So, yeah, grade items can panic students pretty quickly, honestly. So, and a lot of students don't look at it, and veteran online students are not going to call you on that. They're going to say, I know I'm going to do what's assigned, and if there's extra columns, I've seen that before, and they'll disregard. But especially new students who don't realize, and they're really diligent, and they don't want to mess anything up, and they live in fear that they'll forget something, they're going to look at this, and it will panic them quickly. So, but the student view tool will allow you to see what the students are seeing, and that way, when they call you and say, this is going on, and you're looking at it and you don't see that, you'll be able to see exactly what they see. There's a few things that students can do from their grades area, which are really helpful. They can view the rubric, which was used to grade them. They can see the description just gives the category. So if you were using weighted grades and a student wanted to check your calculations, they could individually go through and do that if they like. They can view, if it's a test or an assignment, they can go back to the record of their submissions.
And if it's from the last class, if you check the box, I forget what it's called, but if you check the box that says that they can look at the test.
Yeah, then it'll pull up there. Yes.
Yeah.
So even if you had a test, and it was no longer available to students to take, so they couldn't access it, but you had checked the selections to allow them to see the questions and the answers that they submitted, they could go here and access it, and it would pull up the entire display of their questions. So,
and if you give them an assignment,
yeah,
you put some feedback on the assignment.
Exactly. This is where they go. Students can actually access that, and let me go into a different course where we can see some examples of that. Students can access like their own attempts, their own work that they've submitted through the grades area, but they can also access it through the submission link. But in a lot of cases, instructors will make the submission links unavailable after the deadline is passed, so students can't just keep submitting late work. Well, in that case, a student who has submitted on time wants to review their work, and they can't get to it that way, they can get to it through the grade. And they would do that just by clicking on the link, and then up would pull their assignment. And they can see
over there what you said.
Yeah, they can download a copy of theirs, they can see their file. So it's really helpful for students, and it's good to use the student view tool so that you can just kind of explore what exactly they can see, because a lot of times students will say, well, I can't see your comments. I don't see your comments, because they're expecting it to show up right there, but the comments are here. So without knowing that, you know that it's showing up somewhere, and on your screen it's showing up on the right-hand corner in the grade view, because that's where you put it. But for students, they can click on comments, or they can click on the submission, and if it's over here, they'll see it there. So it's good to use the student view tool, because what they're seeing is so often different from what instructors are seeing, and that way you can check and you can kind of help students, especially if they're anxious about those sort of things. So, do we have any questions about the student's view of Grade Center or of grades?
This is kind of related, but I mean, as far as Grade Center, with everything else actually in Blackboard, I know that we mention it. Everyone's probably tired of hearing it, but especially now with the new release of Internet Explorer, IE 11, we're continuing to recommend Mozilla Firefox or Google Chrome for use of Blackboard. Students, when they call, that's the first thing we ask is, what browser are you using? And 9 times out of 10, the issue with viewing their grades or instructors working in Grade Center, it's that they're using Internet Explorer. And the latest version of Internet Explorer is particularly nasty with viewing grades and working in Grade Center, and among other things.
Yeah. Yeah, for students in the latest version of Internet Explorer, when they look at grades, it's just a blank screen.
Really?
Yeah, when the latest upgrade came out, we got tons of calls from students. I can't see my grades. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. It's just a white page. What browser are you using? I don't know. Then you're using Internet Explorer. That's what's causing the problem. So it's just a matter of letting students know that that's the issue, and in some cases convincing them that even though they've been doing it for a long time that way, that the rest of the internet has changed, and so it's not always going to work the same way. So we've talked a few students off the ledge when they thought that their grades your grades are there, you can't see them.
You know, that even happened when I know I called over here when we were doing a test in the computer lab, and the students couldn't pull up the test, and then whoever asked, well, are they on Internet Explorer? And the 2 students that couldn't pull up the test were on the Internet Explorer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and there are signs posted all over campus that tell students to use Firefox and not Internet Explorer. And we get them in the testing center during finals, and they'll call over and like, well, what browser are they using? Well, we've got signs. Well, I know, but go look at their screen. Are they using? Yeah, and it happens a lot, and sometimes it's hard to convince people, but that's really.
Yeah, I use Firefox all the time, and I've run into an issue with Blackboard with pasting.
Yes.
Firefox, it does work in Internet Explorer.
Yes, there are some things that work in Internet Explorer that don't work in Firefox, and really, you're never going to have one browser that does everything. The copy and paste issue is kind of a pain. I use Chrome, and it doesn't have the copy and paste issue. I can copy and paste just fine in Chrome. But if I have an issue with anything that I can't immediately resolve, I'll switch to Firefox to check it out, because I know that ultimately it is the most compatible browser overall with Blackboard. Firefox is. So it's good to have all 3 browsers and switch around and find which one works. And that it's not, browser issues are not something we can control. The internet changes, the browsers change, the software changes, and they change in that order. And we don't have authority to change any of those things. We can tell you how to work within them, but we don't really actually make those changes. So those throw us for a loop every time there's an update. So we have to kind of just work, and it's always especially if it's a display issue. It's going to be most likely a browser issue. If stuff is there but it doesn't look quite right, or stuff is there but when you try to go to a different place it takes you the wrong direction, that's almost always a browser issue. So. And do we have any other questions about browsers or Grade Center in browsers?
Jackie, I know we've got a little time. I was just wondering, I mean, as far as creating an item like an assignment in Blackboard, how that differs from creating the column manually. You talked about it a little earlier, and we had that slide, but actually showing it may help.
Okay, sure. When you're in a content area, whether it's your lessons or your tests or whatever area you choose, or discussions, and you're building anything under the assessment menu, or if you're building a discussion and you add a grade to it, so anything that you basically add a point value to, I should have put 5 points on that. Anything that you put points on is going to create a column in Grade Center. So we called that one test assignment. So if we go back to Grade Center, we'll see test assignment showed up right there. So we don't need to make another column for it. And that's a grade item column, and it doesn't have the delete option. I can't delete that unless I delete the assignment. So then if I were to create, especially like for a seated course, if I wanted to have an assignment, everybody was going to come to class and draw a picture, and I was going to give them a grade for doing that. I would create a column for that because they're not, unless they're going to, I'm going to make them scan it and submit it as a file. I would put it here, give it the points, attach it to the categories if I'm using weighted grades, click submit, and that is the created type of column, and it will show up right next to it. And as you can see, I can delete that item because I created it manually. And again, that's useful for seated assignments and assignments that are not submitted through interaction with Blackboard. So if you were, and that's not to say that seated courses wouldn't use Blackboard for student submissions, because it's really handy, because then you don't have to collect the papers or carry them around or, you know, buy a lot of red ink pens. So you could just do it all right there. So those are the creating the column and the create and the item, grade item column. I'm going to delete those out because this is a real course sort of thing. So once you have deleted the assignment, I go into there and delete the assignment. It'll ask me if I really want to delete it, and I'll say yes. It'll have a second caution window come up if there had been submissions, and it will say, people have actually done this. Do you want to delete their work also, or do you want to preserve their column in Grade Center? In which case you would have like an orphaned column in Grade Center, which can get a little tricky and sometimes break on copies. And it would be a weird thing to do, but you could do that. And then when we go back to Grade Center, because I deleted that and there were no submissions, that column is gone as well. Do we have any other questions? All right.
So where can you get a copy of the PowerPoint that you can show on that?
The PowerPoint and the recording links will be sent out with the follow-up email afterwards, either tomorrow or Monday.
Oh, okay.
We have had some issues with the recordings not processing through Collaborate like they're supposed to. We can still get the recordings and we can still record it. It just takes a little longer. So it might be next week before the recordings are ready. But I know with your PD certificates, the PowerPoints and the links and whatever resources we have will be added to that. So I want to encourage everybody to go and be awesome. And if you have any questions, we are happy to make one-on-one time with you, either virtually or in person. We are having some workshops next month here in the lab. That's going to be hands-on, so it's going to be in the lab only. And we'll have one on YouTube and one on Grade Center. So bring your stuff. We'll comb through it. We will get it beautiful. And then if you go and you do colors in your Grade Center, or you use something from the session and it works really great and it works great for your students, please let us know. If you try to use weighted grades and they're terrible and they confuse your students and you hate it, please let us know, because we need to know what's working for students and what's working for instructors. And if you do something that's really awesome and it's really effective, or it didn't work but you really learned from it, please let us know, because I will give you a prize. I will give you a prize if you do something like, look how awesome this was. I will definitely give you a prize. So.
Well, thank you, Jay.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.